ordered, nested, immutable. How are these characteristics related to tuples? Hello, Saipals! I am Ma'am Jerica Quinto, your science teacher for today. In this episode of Pagham Alam Hub, we are going to discuss what tuples are in Python. We will determine the proper syntax of writing its code. We will also demonstrate methods and functions that can or cannot be used in tuple creation. Lastly, we will appreciate the advantages of using tuples in programming. In the next few minutes, we will explore science for another moment. Remember, there are different built-in data structures in Python, such as lists, tuples, sets, and dictionaries. Episode 22 discusses in detail the different methods and functions that can be used in creating a list. Let us now discuss what a tuple is. A tuple is a sequence of values much like a list. The important difference between a list and a tuple is that tuples are immutable. It means each element in a tuple has a specific position, and that position is fixed. Indeed, it is not possible to add nor remove elements from the tuple once it has been created. To understand more about tuples, let's code an example. Based on the given code, the term countries is referred to as the variable name. The values in the tuples are called elements or items. Each element of the tuple is separated by a comma. In our example, Philippines, South Korea, and Thailand are the elements. Elements of the tuple are enclosed in parentheses so that Python understands that you are specifying a tuple. The values stored in a tuple can be any data type, such as strings, floats, integers, and booleans. Another important thing that we must know about a tuple is that you should avoid using the term tuple as a variable name because it is a built-in key function in Python. Let us now write some codes involving tuple using REPL.it. Just like a list, elements of a tuple are indexed with numerical representation that starts with 0, then 1, 2, 3, and so on. In our coded tuple, the index of Calabarzon is 0. What is the index of Soxergen? That's right, the index of Soxergen is 2. If you want to call a specific element in a tuple using an index, you can write this code. It printed Calabarzon because Calabarzon is at index 0. How about if we write this code? What will be its output? Correct! It printed NCR because NCR is at index 4. Take note, since tuples are immutable, the methods that we can use become limited because we cannot add nor remove elements in a tuple. To prove this, let us create a variable named provinces with values Cavite, Laguna, Batangas, Rizal, and Quezon. Let us try to add and remove elements in the tuple. If we try adding or removing an element to the tuple using the append and remove methods, we will get an error message, attribute error. This error is raised when a method to be used is not allowed. Thus, append and remove methods cannot be used in dealing with tuples. Although the elements of tuples cannot be modified, we can compare the values of the elements of one tuple to the elements of another tuple using comparison operators. Take note that the type of elements inside the tuple must be integers or floating points in order for these codes to work. The expected output in comparing tuples is Boolean. Let us code these tuples and compare their values. Based from our code, the output is true. Take note that Python compares elements by pairing the respective indices of both tuples. This means that the element at index 0 in the first tuple is compared to the element at index 0 in the second tuple. If the first pair of elements is equal, the next pair of elements with the same index is then compared. Once the comparison operator is satisfied or dissatisfied, it disregards the remaining pairs of elements and prints the Boolean output true or false. In our first example, both tuples have 1 as their first element at index 0. Automatically, Python will move on to the next pair of elements. It will now check whether the second element on the first tuple is less than the second element on the second tuple. Since 2 is less than 3, the comparison stops and Boolean output true is printed. Although element 6 is greater than 5, this comparison was no longer considered because Python only processed the first unequal pair of elements. Let us have another example. What do you think will be the output of this comparison? That's right, the output is false. In our second example, 3 is less than 6. Therefore, this satisfying our comparison operator greater than. Although the remaining pairs of elements 4 and 1 and 5 and 2 satisfy the greater than operator, they are no longer considered by Python. There are several built-in functions that can be used in dealing with tuples. We can use the len function to get the total length of a tuple. Take note, len pertains to the number of elements. Let us code this example. To determine the number of elements in the variable municipalities, let us type this code. In our example, the length is 5 because there are 5 elements in the tuple named municipalities. To specify how many times an element appears in a given tuple, we can use the count function. Using the same code, let us check how many times lokban appeared in the tuple. Let us write the code. Based on our example, lokban appeared twice. Lastly, we can use the index function to determine the position of an element in the tuple. Again, using the same tuple, we will write this code. The output is 2 because mauban is located at index 2. One distinct characteristic of a tuple is that it can be nested. This feature of tuples allows complex data structures to be constructed as required by an application. For example, we want to combine 3 different tuples, namely numbers, barangays, and random. Based from our code, the variables numbers and barangays were inserted in the third tuple, random. The items in the nested tuples are combined into the new tuple. Take note that the elements of each tuple are still enclosed in parentheses when they are nested. Since tuples are quite similar to lists, both of them are used in similar situations. However, there are certain advantages of implementing a tuple over a list. Here are some of the main advantages. First, we generally use tuples for different data types, while lists for similar data types. Second, since tuples are immutable, iterating through a tuple is faster than with lists, so there is a slight performance boost. Third, tuples can be used as a key for a dictionary. With lists, this is not possible. Lastly, if you have data that doesn't change, implementing it as tuple will guarantee that it remains write protected. In this episode of Pagham Alam Hub, we have learned that a tuple is a sequence of values much like a list. The important difference between a list and a tuple is that tuples are immutable. You learn about the proper syntax of writing codes involving tuples. The values in the tuples are called elements or items. Each element of the tuple is separated by a comma and enclosed in parentheses. The values stored in a tuple can be any data type, such as strings, floats, integers, and booleans. We also demonstrated methods and functions that can or cannot be used in tuple creation. Since tuples are immutable, we cannot use the append and remove methods to add or delete elements. However, we can compare the values of the elements of one tuple to the elements of another tuple using comparison operators. Generally, tuples are used for different data types, while lists for similar data types. Iterating through a tuple is faster with a list since it is immutable. In addition, tuples can be used as a key for a dictionary. If you have data that doesn't change, coding them as a tuple will guarantee that they remain write protected. That's all for today's Disciples. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. See you again next week for another moment. Only here in Pagham Alam Hub, pala dyan sa Tech Portal. Bye!